Hello and welcome to the Sex Within Marriage podcast. My name is JD and I blog over at uncoveringintimacy.com. And on the first Tuesday of every month, Chris from The Line Within Us and I co-host a couples night. Couples from our communities get together and we just sit around and talk about marriage over Zoom. We discuss struggles, share ideas, tips, and a lot of funny stories. And it is an absolute blast. And this Tuesday, we got together and talked about resiliency in marriage. And there were about 6 couples in the Zoom call, and I thought they all had a lot of wisdom to share. So I tried to quickly take some notes and thought I'd relay them to you and maybe give you a taste of what couples nights is. Like, you're not going to get any of the funny stories, but at least you'll get the main points of what we talked about. Because marriages need resiliency, you're going to face struggles. They might be external, like events happening with your job, your family, your friends, and more. They might be internal, such as the type of struggles 2 individuals face when you put them together for long periods of time, for years on end. Challenges are normal, but we need to learn how to face them and not only survive them, but ideally thrive and grow through them. So here are the things that our small group came up with. The first is grace and forgiveness. Now, this might seem obvious. After all, we are all imperfect, all sinners, and mistakes will be made, whether intentionally or not. But being able to forgive each other and move forward is a necessity. However, knowing that and exercising it in the moment are 2 very different things. I imagine there are many couples who sing songs and pray prayers about grace and forgiveness in church and then yell at each other on the way home from the same service. I know a couple where the husband is a deacon and the wife is a deaconess, and they refuse to share a car, even to church, because they can't stand each other's driving. So they take 2 cars everywhere. And it's hard to forgive, especially when that person knows exactly where to poke you to make it hurt the most. But it's important to be able to forgive quickly and frequently, because the longer you let that unforgiveness fester, the worse the divide between you will become and the harder it will be to reconcile. Having a spouse who will extend grace and be forgiving gives you a lot of freedom to grow as well. I've met too many couples where one or both spouses are afraid to say the wrong thing because the other spouse struggles to forgive or jumps to the worst possible interpretation. And in a marriage like that, you can't share your thoughts, your hopes, your dreams, or fears because you're afraid that they'll be taken wrong and you'll be attacked for them. In a marriage that exercises grace and forgiveness, you can express yourself and be known more fully, which I think is something we all want. You can also work together to meet those hopes and dreams and deal with your collective fears. The second way is to pick your battles, choose the hills to die on. Not everything is worth a fight or a disagreement. Some things are. But if you choose to fight for every conflict, you're going to find that your marriage is constantly in dispute, which brings a lot of stress and anxiety. And these are the things that turn people into workaholics or worse. On the other side, choosing never to disagree on anything is also a problem because conflicts aren't harmful. They're just 2 people with different viewpoints. If you can't ever share your thoughts, are you really in a relationship? But there are times when it's worth speaking up and times when it is not. If my wife says something like, "Isn't those the most beautiful sunset?" it makes no sense for me to challenge that statement and say, "No, the one 2 weeks ago was better." Instead, I should just relax and enjoy the view. Not every conflict has to be a fight, even if I believe the one 2 weeks ago was better. Next is the idea of being okay with it not being okay. Life won't always be smooth. There will be periods of stress, confusion, and disagreement. And it is a skill to be okay with not being okay for short periods. You can get through difficult times. You can overcome hardships. You don't have to leave simply because you feel unhappy in that moment. You can even leave conflict alone for a while in the right circumstances. For example, I do not like the advice that you should never go to bed angry. People take this to mean that you can't sleep if you're in conflict. And I agree that it's good to let go of your anger, but that doesn't mean that you should stay up till 4 a.m. arguing about what color white the walls should be painted. It's okay to say, this is not a productive time to argue. Let's get some sleep and see if it's still important in the morning. Be okay with it not being okay for a bit. Sometimes it's better to let the conflict settle a bit, or for when you're in a better position or have the resources to tackle it. Like I said before, I've had coaching clients who wait to have their fights while they're on their coaching call because they know they can't have a good fight themselves. So they wait until I can help them have a good and productive argument. And to do that, they have to be okay with not being okay until our next call. Now, if you feel the conflict is festering and growing, then that's not a good time to let it be. But learning to step back and just let it be there for a bit is an excellent skill to have. It also makes you realize that you can still be a couple even though everything isn't perfect, because when is anything perfect? It's good to be able to choose each other when things are hard. Next is to have each other's backs. Life is much easier when you can go through it with your spouse as a team. I see many couples who operate under a battle mentality. They have this paradigm that if one is winning, the other one must be losing. Their conversations are all about, well, if you get this, then I get that. If I do this for you, then you have to do this for me. They're always seeking to be even, like a business relationship, rather than simply striving to love each other as a marriage should be. But when you're in it together, when it's the two of you against the world, you always have a safe space to return at the end of the day. You can come home, relax, drop all the burdens for a bit. My wife is my oasis in the world's desert rather than another fight that I must survive once I get home. So be your spouse's partner, not their adversary. Have each other's back. The next one is to take your wedding vows seriously. The traditional wedding vow till death do us part signifies a lifelong commitment. For resilient couples, these aren't just words, but a guiding principle. This mindset of enduring love helps them navigate hardships with a shared understanding that they're in it for the long haul. My wife and I have been married for 23 years, and when people ask me how to do it, my glib first response is to say, it's pretty simple. You just don't get divorced. Which usually gets a chuckle, and then I go on to say, now if you want to be happily married, that takes a little bit more. And that usually kicks off a pretty good conversation about their marriage and what their next step is in their relationship and what it might look like to move up a level, whether that's from bad to okay, or okay to good, or good to great. Everyone can get one step better. However, the number one thing you need to improve your marriage is to stay in it. That gives you a starting point, because once you can't leave, then you have a choice. You can either have a happy marriage or an unhappy one. Which do you want? Of course, one spouse might choose happy and the other unhappy. Those are difficult cases, but most couples will, when asked directly, choose a happy marriage over an unhappy one. And then it's just a matter of aligning their behaviors to match what they want. And lastly, I think seek understanding. One of the hardest things to do in marriage is to try and see things from your spouse's perspective. We tend to see things differently as men and women, and we all know this. Yet we seem to think that our spouse should be able to read our minds and that we can read theirs. We assign motives to our spouse's actions or inactions that don't exist. We assume that they can see things that we do when they don't. We say arrogant things like telling them what's difficult or straightforward based on our own perspectives, skills, resources, and insights. Learning to stop and think about what they're dealing with, their history, viewpoint, mindset, and everything else that rolls into the context is hard to do, but very worthwhile. When we don't understand what they understand, we need to learn to ask questions rather than simply invalidate their experience. This made a huge difference in my marriage anyways. So those are 6 things that we came up with for what makes a resilient marriage. If you want to hear the stories, then you need to come to Couples Night yourself. It's held the first Tuesday of every month. It's open to all of our $5 a month supporters. And if you come, I guarantee you'll have a lot of fun. So lastly, I'm curious, what principles or practices have helped you and your spouse build a resilient marriage? Share your thoughts in the comments. You can click on the link in the show notes to go to the blog and share them there. And that's it for today. Talk to you next time.